There are few places where more pictures are snapped than at the finish line of a marathon. So many people documenting their friend or spouse finishing the race. And so in Boston, so many billions of pixels of evidence. But can the bomber or bombers be ID'd in one of those pics? Is it practical? Is it legal? Craig Timberg has been looking into that and stops by to chat. Good to see you, Craig.
Good to see you too.
So I guess there's both the practical and the legal, and there's both the official government law enforcement, and we see a lot of just private citizens doing this. So I guess we take each of those in parts, and starting with, do we really think we can ID someone this way?
Well, you certainly, when you have a time and a place, as you do when something explodes like this, and you have a bunch of cameras around, you certainly can narrow the universe of suspects, so I think it's probably being used first and foremost as a triage tool, and figuring out who they ought to be out interviewing in person. It's just very useful. So
they can take a photo of the crowd and say, that's Craig Timberg. And how do they know that's Craig Timberg?
Well, they would start by narrowing it down to people who would be doing suspicious things, right? In this case, carrying a black backpack and leaving its contents somewhere. And then what they're probably doing is using what they call facial recognition software, which is running the images that are captured from various cameras against databases of how people's faces look. And there are more and more of these databases every day. The DMV keeps them, the State Department keeps them with passports, private companies have them in some cases. And so I don't know exactly what's being used in this case, but there's a lot of data out there on all of us and how we look.
And so you would assume that your photo would be in one of those databases. My photo would be in one of those databases. I have a passport.
Yeah, I think probably. The real tension right now is between whether the databases include people who merely have, for example, driver's license, or people who are actually suspected of crime. So there's different categories, if you will. And so there's a fight between the law enforcement community and the civil liberties community about whether these databases should include sort of essentially everybody or just those who are reasonable criminal suspects.
And we're not sure right now which it is.
It's a moving target, and it's different things in different states, and not everyone's being totally candid about what sort of databases they're using.
I have a Facebook profile. Is that enough?
It's enough for your data to be someplace where law enforcement could get it with a search warrant, right? And likewise, when you upload your pictures to a place like Picasa, anywhere on the web, law enforcement can get a search warrant, and if a judge signs off on it, they're able to go and get that data.
So as we said, law enforcement is not the only ones playing this game. We saw the New York Post perhaps make a mistake by trying to identify who in that photo might have been up to no good. Reddit has really been involved in this. What's that aspect?
Well, the really fascinating part of this case has been the proliferation of images and sort of like amateur sleuthing, right? We have this sort of idea that somehow if we crowdsource this, we're going to figure out something that the cops can't figure out. And it's an intriguing notion. It's not as though it's inherently insane, but it is a little bit scary when you have private citizens looking at pictures of other private citizens and drawing circles of them and proliferating that on a website, right? I mean, just because you carry a black backpack and you're looking in a funny direction, that may be enough to get someone looking at a website to think that you look suspicious. But heck, I've done that plenty of times, and I'm not a bomber. So the idea that we're all sort of intruding on each other's privacy is really it reveals how powerful that can be.
Yeah, whenever this stuff comes up, the civil libertarian in me always thinks there was a moment when people fighting for suffrage or fighting for civil rights were on the wrong side, even of the US government. And if these tools had been available to the government then, what could that have meant for folks that now we think of as national heroes, but at another moment we're on the wrong side of the law?
Right, I mean, the principles in the Constitution, they seem clear, but they get mucked up every time the technology advances. I mean, that's the kind of moment we're in. The idea that you have a presumption of innocence, right? That the government can't search and seize your personal property. It was a little easier in 1780 whatever, when it would have been like a soldier coming to your home and knocking on your door. But now, with all of the data that's out there about us, the picture has changed, and these fights get continually relitigated every time the technology becomes more sophisticated, and the capacity for intruding and potentially solving real cases becomes more powerful. And that's where we are. We're again in this very awkward conversation about what's best for society as opposed to what's best for individuals.
Okay, Craig, sometimes I think you have the most interesting beat in this whole newsroom.
I certainly think so.
So I'm glad when you share some of it with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
That will do it for us for tonight. We will fold things up. Hope to see you back here tomorrow.